gonna say it. Somebody should. Let's talk about two time. Let's talk about bum wine, yeah. You're asking the questions that nobody could. Like where the bone thugs and are they in harmony? Help for Snowman.
All right, everybody. Here's the thing. I've been working on Grinch 2, right? On and off for like 2 months. And we're on page 30 of 93. So what I decided to do, because I couldn't just let it go and be like, just leave it unfinished in my wake. And at the same time, I decided that doing it the way I have been, reading it line by line, ain't working. It's just going to take too long. I'm bored of it. You must be bored of it. Everybody must be bored. So what I decided to do, because for some reason, this particular project is like one of the few times in my life where I was like, I have standards, God damn it. You know what I mean? I can't just stop doing this. That would be insane. I don't know why this particular project has inspired, you know what I mean, such a thing. I don't know why this is the hill I'm willing to die on. You know, people say that usually in the context of it's not a hill I'm willing to die on. And I'm like, this is the one, baby. Grinch 2 by Uncle Bob. This is when I prove to the world that, I'm not just a pretender. I'm a real deal podcaster who's willing to suffer. So I read the whole thing and I made some notes so that we can go through this and just kind of talk about it in brief, and I can update you. So last time we left, the Grinch and his now wife, they'd opened like a resort on the Grinch's mountain, and that seemed to be completely resolved. In a normal movie, a Grinch 2, opening like a theme park would be probably the entire movie, right? It would be like, well, let's have him open a theme park and then, something happens that makes that difficult, or something happens at the theme park that, whatever, you know what I mean? Something. But instead, it's like the first third of this, and then it seems like Uncle Bob was like, holy shit, I'm out of ideas. And there was also a lot of the Grinch dating this woman and getting married, and so it's like he's never eaten at a restaurant before and likes to eat garbage or whatever, which is like, oh, Uncle Bob, classic. So last time when we left off, the Grinch and his wife were in a hot air balloon because they were going to cross the mountains in search of the Grinch's parents. It seems that we've been set up to likely encounter a scenario where the Grinch and another baby were switched at birth. So there was like a Whoville baby and a Grinch baby. Or the Grinch baby was meant to go to Grinch Village. I don't know if we know that there's like a switch happening yet. So they're crossing the mountains in a hot air balloon because that's like the, I guess, safest and most reasonable version of crossing a long distance in this world. And the Grinch was eating a lot of beans, and I'm pretty sure that at some point that's going to cause him, that's how he's going to fart power the balloon. They're going to because they have an engine, because the wind only goes one direction. So they're like, you'll never be able to come back unless, the wind goes the other direction or whatever. And they're just like, let's do it anyway. And I was like, you're watching this, and it's like, I kind of get if it was like, I don't know, I'm of a people fleeing somewhere, and I'm like, you know what? I don't ever want to come back here anyway. Or if the Grinch was like, screw Whoville, I don't need them. That would make more sense, right? And then he goes to Grinchland. Here, as we go, I want to suggest alternatives to Uncle Bob's Grinch 2. One of my alternatives would be Grinch goes to Grinchtown And then he's around other Grinches and he hates it. He's like, everybody's such an asshole and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, is this what it's like to be around me? And they're all like, I mean, kind of, but you know, it's easier to handle you because you're one guy. And he's like, oh, okay, well, shit. You know what I mean? I've learned a lesson. But no, instead we're just going to go there and there's like an engine on the hot air balloon. It's something that I notice a lot in narratives written by, I've edited a few. I edited one very long one that was a narrative that someone wrote that was, you know, it was a beginner's effort, a beginner's book, first book. And like something you'll notice is problems will come up, but they get resolved really quickly. And then they have to come up with other problems. And I feel like maybe that's like maybe this will be a little bit of an advice for writing in this podcast, which is just coming from some asshole who does a podcast. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. Take that for what it's worth. But I think it's like, rather than having multiple problems in your book, you can have fewer problems and just make them more difficult to solve. And I think that creates more drama and tension, as well as making it a little easier on you, the writer, instead of having this little problem, I'll solve it, and then just going from problem lily pad to problem lily pad. So anyway, they're in the hot air balloon, and this goes on for a few days. They're just in a fucking balloon, slowly going across the mountains, which is something that I think would be really awesome at first, right? Like if you were high above the mountains in a hot air balloon, first it'd be terrifying, and then it would be probably cool, and like at night it would be cool, and then I would probably not sleep because any minor bumps or whatever, and I would wake up and be like, am I dying? I'm dying right now, right? I'm dead. And I'm like, no, I'm okay. I always wonder about hot air balloons, because I'm like, for a hot air balloon, I guess I understand in modern times, right? Like a hot air balloon has to fly high enough that it's not going to crash into power lines and stuff. But I'm always like, do they have to be that high in the air? Is that like the only way it's possible to travel? Like there's only reliable wind up there or something? Because I'm like, why do you have to be that high? You know what I mean? Couldn't we be from a height where it's like, well, if this balloon started plummeting down, as long as it wasn't in total free fall, maybe it's survivable. Anyway, they're going over the mountains and they spot something that looks like maybe the Grinch village, and his wife gets very excited, and the Grinch repeatedly tells her, easy girl, which is not a phrase I recommend using with your wife ever, let alone multiple times. Easy girl definitely says horse to me, and I would not suggest using that phrase with your wife. But like, his wife doesn't seem to mind that he's saying that. It's like their thing. They just say, I guess, you know, and not in like a put on that horse mask, take off your pants kind of way. In a just a, I guess this is how we talk to each other way that, I don't know, it's a little weird, but not intentionally. I wonder if Uncle Bob says that to his wife. I mean, okay, it's dicey from the very get-go to tell your wife in any way, calm down. Telling anyone that. It doesn't have to be your wife. Just telling, you know, if someone's like flipping out at a bar and they're drunk and you're like, hey, calm down. For some reason, that's the last thing anyone wants to hear. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like more people have been punched after saying calm down than have been punched after saying, hey, fuck you. Like, it's almost like you telling them to be different than how they are is worse, even though the way you're being is unreasonable. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is in people. I wonder if that's like an American thing. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're in another country and someone's like, hey, calm down. Is that like a personal affront? Or is that like a, oh yeah, maybe I am Maybe I'll take a moment and consider whether I'm being irrational. Anyway, so they land the balloon in what looks like a big flat top mountain that has a bunch of caves around it. And they find like Grinch Town, Grinch Land, whatever. And I did think this was a moment in the story too that's happened a little bit up to this point, but now is full on, which is like, you know, how do you as Uncle Bob, just some fucking guy, and then you're like, I saw the Grinch movie, I've read the Grinch book, and you're like, I think I know better than Dr. Seuss and can fill in the backstory here. Do you know what I mean? This is like a little trap I think we were in with like the Star Wars prequels, where it's like, I don't think we would have accepted them if it wasn't George Lucas, right? Because it's like, we're all like, oh yeah, he's got all these ideas and it's his thing. And if someone else invented the backstory for it, we'd be like, oof, well, that was, you know, of course it sucked. But maybe he should have done it that way, because it's like, then that way when it sucked, we wouldn't all blame him for that, right? We'd be like, well, yeah, of course it sucked. It wasn't George, man. It was some other idiot. But yeah, I find it odd that it's okay. For some reason, in my mind, doing the continuing adventures of the Grinch is less insulting to like the original creator than if you were doing the prequel, the backstory, and you're like filling in the backstory. I guess just because I'm like, well, maybe. I mean, I am generally opposed to prequels in most cases because I just usually feel like, you know, I think a lot of times they start a story where they do because they're like, well, this is when the exciting stuff is happening. So the less backstory I need to show, the better. Maybe I can just do the backstory in a text crawl that lasts for about 45 seconds and just explains there are two factions in space that are fighting. Then if I could do that, maybe that saves me the effort of, making an entire movie that shows everyone is a child and like maybe perhaps the, non-interesting, maybe there are interesting things about that child, but probably nothing as interesting as what happened later. Yeah, maybe like the Solo movie is a good example of that, where you're like, I mean, how many adventures has this guy been on? And him doing a train heist is fine and not a bad idea for this movie, but like I think the story where he saved the universe a couple times is probably more. I'm going to be honest, it's a little more compelling, and this feels like a downgrade. So like where the Grinch came from is probably less exciting than the time he stole Christmas. But I don't know, for some reason I think that's more insulting to do the backstory than it is to, maybe because I feel like it implies that, a good enough job wasn't done on the backstory. You know what I mean? Like, nah, Dr. Seuss kind of left us hanging, I'm going to fix this shit. Anyway, so they meet the Grinch's real parents, and then it turns out there was a Who baby that was dropped off at the Grinch village, whose name I can't remember, but I'll find it in here. So they meet the Grinches who was supposed to be his real parents, and they look like him or whatever. There's a maddening format issue. I know I talked a lot already about like, is this real or not? And one of the things that feels incredibly real to me is there's a picture, and it's just of a door set into like a cave wall. And it says, camera shows them walking up about 6 steps and then a small platform leading to the front door of their cave. It's a large brown wooden door with a half moon shaped window. The door. Then I've got an image that takes up the entire width of the page of this door that's being described. And then I've got the rest of the sentence. Opening is carved into the mountainside. And it's like maddening that this image is in the middle of the text. And it does, I'm like, if this is fake, they did a good job of doing things that make it seem real. Because you're like, no one would do that on purpose. You know what I mean? No one with any sense would do that on purpose. Unless the sense was they were trying to throw you off the scent of it being fake. Then we got just a quick reference. So something that happens a lot in this book, and that I also have noticed in amateur stuff, is they do a lot of like sitting down for meals or having tea or whatever. Here's my theory on this. Something you'll notice in movies is they do a lot of like, come up for a drink. Would you like a coffee? Do you want this? And the reason they do that in movies is because what you want is you want your characters to have some kind of business that they're doing so that you don't notice that they're just talking, because otherwise they'd just be sitting there and talking, and that doesn't give them a lot to do, and it's kind of boring to watch. So unless what they're talking about is super compelling and the dialogue is really, really great, it's super boring to watch. So they'll give them something to do that kind of raises the interest level a little bit. And I think what people do is they put that into written stories without realizing that just the fact of people like heating up water on the stove isn't like a compelling action. Do you know what I'm saying? I always think like if you have dialogue in a story, having business for the characters to do is even more important. And in fact, if you're going to have a bunch of dialogue, you should definitely have the characters doing something pretty physical so that you can describe what's happening in the scene as well as what's happening in the dialogue. And it's extra good, in my opinion, if what the physical thing is somewhat interesting. You know what I mean? If it's new or like people are learning how to do something sort of subtly, or if they're understanding something about the character because of the way they do something. A way they do this in movies a lot that people make fun of and in TV is they'll have somebody preparing a dinner and they'll have a character like chopping vegetables. And if you actually look at what they're doing, you'll be like, oh my God, it's very obvious that this person does not know how to chop a vegetable at all. Or, they'll do something goofy like cube a potato and then wash it instead of washing it before. You know what I mean? Weird shit like that. But if you did that on purpose, if you were like, if you had two characters, one's preparing dinner and the one they're talking and the one is noticing that the one who's preparing dinner doesn't know what they're doing, that tells us something about that character, right? It tells us something about their connection to normal stuff, or maybe it tells us a little bit about their age or experiences or, just something, right? If they're in a super nice kitchen that you'd see on MTV Cribs and they start cutting up a red pepper by just slicing it right through the center and the seeds go everywhere, you'd be like, this person has resources, but doesn't know how to cook. You know what I mean? And you can kind of think from there where it goes. So anyway, that my two pieces of advice are either to have people do something more interesting than sit in a living room and drink tea or what have you, or eat food, or if they're eating food, there should be something about the way the food is prepared, served, eaten, something that gives us a little bit of something about the character. There you go. We do get in this part of a food thing, quote, "For dinner, we'll be having a nice green salad and then some green beans with our green ham." And I thought I was like, is it all just green because they're Grinch? And then I was like, wait a minute, green ham? Is this like Uncle Bob making the Seuss crossover universe? Is this happening? Like, the GCU, the Grinch cinematic universe happening here, where green eggs and ham become part of it? But then I get like 2 pages later and the Grinch goes, "It just dawned on me." And the Grinch turns and looked into the camera. "Green eggs and ham? Where have I heard that before?" And then I was like, you ruined it, Uncle Bob. Like, if you're going to reference green eggs and ham, they should just say it, but don't have the Grinch look into the camera and be like, where have I heard that before? I mean, I guess, here's the thing. If this is a movie for kids, which I don't even know if we've gotten into that. Like, who is this for? But, like, if it's for kids, this is a terrible movie for kids because nothing that kids would enjoy is happening here. And I say that even though it seemed like every movie for kids was about, like, I don't know, an evil company taking something over. And it was like, I mean, why would a kid give a shit about that? You know, I always thought that was really funny. Like, a 10-year-old and they're like, oh, a condo developer is going to build condos on this beach. That was never something I thought about. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't something, I didn't understand the economics of these things to know why or if that's bad as a kid. And it's like, why do they continually do that in, like, definitely 80s and 90s kids movies? You know what I mean? The stakes were often something that I was like, it's like, you know, the dad in Beethoven, and it's like, he's going to have his boss over for dinner so he can get a promotion or some shit like that. And you're like, I get this for a sitcom, but like for a kid's movie with a dog, you know what I mean? That, like, the guy screams Beethoven, you know, I don't know. So then the Grinch is like, are the chickens green? And Frank, whoever that is, says, no, they're brown. And Grinch says, but. And then Martha puts her hand over Grinch's mouth to stop him from talking. Grinch, please, can we stop talking about the color of food and just appreciate how lucky we are to be having it? And I'm like, Martha, being a little bit of a wet blanket here. Because I'm like, if I went somewhere and all the food was green, you know what I mean? And they were describing things to me, and they're like, we're going to have green this and green that and blah, blah, blah. I'd be like, so is all the food green? And then Poonmaster Flex wouldn't be like, hey, idiot, just shut up and enjoy it. She'd be like, I was thinking the same thing. You know what I mean? Even if she didn't say it. Later, when we talked later, this is one of the best things that can happen when you're like out to dinner or on vacation with your spouse or something, is something weird is going on and you notice it, and then you notice that your spouse is noticing it, and you kind of give each other a look like, I cannot wait to talk about this, but we have to do it later because we have to make sure we get all the details here. But holy shit, later we have to talk about this. Also, though, you know, he's like, is all the food green? And I'm like, that's not like an unreasonable question. That's not an insulting question. It's just like, it's a very practical question, in my opinion. Is everything green? And she's like, dear, you're being rude. And it's like, am I? I mean, I would be curious about that. I would certainly be curious about a monochromatic food situation. Do you know what I mean? And then I would be like, well, if everything is visually green, does it taste the same as the things that aren't green? You know what I mean? Does a carrot taste like a carrot when it's green? Maybe. But then that's even stranger, right? Isn't that weirder than if it tasted different? Because if it tastes the same, if they're all green food tastes the same as our multicolor food, what is going on? You know what I mean? Like, what cosmic force is creating this? Okay, I need to move on. Grinch, you can call me late. You can call me anything you want. Just don't call me late for breakfast. Everyone chuckles. And I just highlighted that because I was like, everyone chuckles. Everyone thinks that's funny. You know what? Okay, here's another suggestion for this. It would be funny if, like, everyone in Whoville by Grinch 2 sort of found the Grinch amusing, right? Like, they all sort of thought it was funny that he's grouchy and an asshole and stuff. And so, you know, when he's being his normal grouchy stuff, I don't know, they just get a kick out of it. And he makes his little dad jokes and stuff like that. And then he goes to Grinchville and nobody feels that way. Or he finds out he's going to be a dad, and he starts saying these dad jokes, and then he's just like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know where that came from. Everyone's like, it's because your wife is expecting a baby and whatever. Okay, so here's what happened. Martha, who I think is Grinch's wife. It all connects. My husband and the Hula Hands baby were accidentally switched. Grinch showed up in a Pumbercella basket at the doorstep of two elderly sisters that ended up adopting him. And then it goes to camera can show miscellaneous segments while the narrator explains the scene of the two Pumbercellas bumping into each other and getting knocked off course. Grinch ended up at the steps of the two sisters, Clarnella and Rose Who. The next morning, they discovered him out in the cold and brought the basket with the shivering baby inside. And blah, blah, blah. So basically, it's like two storks crashed into each other, got confused. They took a Whoville to Grinchville, and they took the Grinch to Whoville. Okay, here's an amazing part. They're putting this all together over the course of a very long set of pages when I was like, this just got explained to us on, let's see, page 40? And we have a lot of dialogue until page 44 when they're still putting it together. And what they have is they have these name tags that were in the baskets, I guess, that the babies were delivered in. And Martha has the one the Grinch had, and it's like ripped up and it says the Grinch. And the other one says the Hula Hands with an unnecessary apostrophe. These are actually written out on paper and like decorated. It says the Hula Hands. There's a heart on each end and like a blue stripe that brackets it on the top and bottom. Photographed on what appears to be a walnut-stained wooden table or possibly floor. So Uncle Bob actually handmade these. You know what I mean? He made these little things and put them in the document so we could see them. Because because that's necessary. You know what I mean? I couldn't picture what a name tag that was ripped would be like. Okay, then we find out what the Grinch's real name is, sort of. But like, we find out. How do we find this out? I can't even remember. But we find out that the Grinch's name is Ethan. Which, I was like, Uncle Bob, the only explanation I have for that is that Uncle Bob likes the Mission Impossible movies. That's the only thing I could come up with for I was like, Ethan. Because here's the thing. Pretty boring name. Also makes the rest of the script incredibly confusing. Because, like, we have Ethan, who is called Ethan by a lot of the other characters, but is still listed as Grinch. So it'll say Grinch, and then, he'll say, call me Ethan. And then someone will say, Ethan, what do you think about this? And then it'll say, Grinch, I think blah, 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 blah. And it's like a super confusing way to do the script. But also I was just like, okay, it is tough. You're in a tough position. That bastard Dr. Seuss put you in a terrible spot because it's like, well, what are you going to call Grinch? You know what I mean? Instead of Grinch, because Grinch is a great name. Grinch is not only a perfect name, it's like come to mean a thing. Do you know what I'm saying? Like we call someone a Grinch and that means something. We all know what that means. Like, it's an invented word and a name that has come to mean, it's almost like Kleenex being, what we call tissue. It's like Grinch is a kind of person. It's a brand that stands in for a type of thing. And so then you have to make up a different name for him. But what's weird to me too is that I'm like, shouldn't the Grinches like in Grinchville have, Grinchy names? You know what I mean? Bone Crusher or something. Goblin Face. Something like that. Instead of Ethan? Another way you could do it would be fun if Whoville people actually had like names like, Crushinator. Murderbot 5000. And then Grinches had names like Ethan. That would be fun. Also, easy way to do this. Grinch is delighted that he's found out his quote unquote real name. But, this is the name that his parents were giving their baby, right? And wouldn't you think like it would be better if, they were like Ethan and he's like, Ethan, what a piece of crap name. You know what I mean? And then he's like, I'm happy that I found my real parents, but I'm going to stick with Grinch. And yeah, I feel it suits me. And everyone would just agree. And that's a big laugh, right? Because everyone's like, he is a Grinch. Anyway, we spend a long time now spinning wheels waiting for Grinch's brother to come home. Like days where nothing happens. His brother Hans, who he calls his brother because they're the babies who got switched. So Hans was raised by Grinch's parents and Ethan was raised by Hans's parents. Do you see what I'm talking about? And so Hans shows up. He's just a guy. You know what I mean? There's nothing interesting about him. He's just some guy, which is, also unfortunate. I feel like there was an opportunity here to have like a nature nurture fun time or something like that. I don't know. And they were like, I don't know. Hans was always really nice. And we thought he was just doing it to rebel. You know what I mean? Because we're all jerks. We're all Grinches. So they all get in the hot air balloon. Grinch, Hans, Grinch's wife, maybe Hans's wife if he has one, or maybe not, who the hell knows, and Grinch's real parents all get in the hot air balloon. And let's see, we have many pages until we get to day 6 of the trip. And it says, camera fades away and into a very slow pan of the entire ridge of mountainside with the numerous caves, while the narrator explains, you can imagine all the emotions and the talk between Hans and Ethan and their parents. And you're like, wait, what? Like, I can imagine all the things they were talking about, about this trip and so on. And I'm like, usually we make a movie so that I don't have to imagine the things that are happening. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, why are you making a movie and then telling me like, use your imagination about what they talked about? And I'm like, no, tell me what they talked about. Isn't that like the whole point? You're not showing me like antics. You're not doing anything. And then you're like, you can figure it out. Okay, also, I was mentioning, like, how I don't really think this is a movie that appeals to kids. And I don't really think it's a movie that appeals to adults. It doesn't appeal to anyone, but it's not that it's, like, shitty. It's not like Trolls World Tour, where I'm like, this is not appealing. It's more like, it's just a movie that I'm like, I don't know what the intended audience is for this, let alone whether it would work for that audience. But, we're in the balloon and the two women are sneaking wine the whole time. And you're like, well, that seems appropriate for a movie for kids. Oh, let's see. We're at day 8 of the trip. Maybe day 9. And we get this little narrator bit. Fortunately, F-O-R-E-T-U-N-A-T-E-L-I. Fortunately, the ladies are so wrapped up in their conversation of Christmas, they're oblivious to the problems arising on board. Martha tells her about how Grinch's sweet relationship to Cindy Lou Who and how she helped change Grinch from a lonely and cranky character to the loving person he's become. All about Santa and the spirit of Christmas, how after he stole Christmas, he returned everything and why, the Christmas jubilation, and how the villagers grew to love him. Meanwhile, Grinch and Hans, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you could just like rescreen. You could pull a Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. And in the history, there's a precedent for taking a Christmas movie and in the sequel, just showing 3/4 of the original. So I guess, let's see. Where is this coming from? Okay, Grinch to Mom and Martha. So they're in the balloon. So back to what I was trying to say before. Our compost chamber is getting near empty. We probably would have been there by now if it wasn't for the breeze and now light wind. I really don't know how much longer before we see Mount Crumpet. Has anyone seen my tabulator? Hans, what's a tabulator? Grinch, oh, there it is. Grinch picks it up and starts pushing buttons, sits back a second, and lets out a small fart. Excuse me. Continues tapping buttons, puts his fingers to his lips and taps a few more buttons. Martha, that's not a tabulator, you idiot. That's a piece of wood I brought, and I draw a dot on it every day we've been away from Whoville. Grinch, now quite embarrassed. No wonder the figures weren't adding up, and he throws it overboard. And I was like, the joke here is that he thinks he's using some kind of a calculation machine, but it's just a piece of wood with dots on it that Martha's drawing on. And I'm like, why? You know what I mean? Like, I don't get it. And I'm like, why wouldn't you do it as a joke? Like, okay, here's a joke. It's a tabulator. And it looks like a calculator, but it's designed so the screen is like a smiley face because it's from Whoville. It's like a smiling Whoville person. But Grinch keeps using it upside down because he's like, wouldn't this person be frowning? And it's like, no, it's supposed to be smiling. And he's like, why would anyone be smiling while they're doing math? That's dumb. And you're like, there you go. There you go. Fixed. There's a commercial they hear on the radio. Tired of the same old sliced ham or the boring roast beast? How about a sandwich that wakes up your taste buds, puts some zep in your step, some crunch in your lunch, make eating fun again with your visit to Hooters? WHO-TERS, as in Whoville. For 1 week only, 2 sandwiches for the price of 1. That's right, come on down to Hooters, located at 12 Main Street. Children must be accompanied by 12 adults or more. Adults are not eligible for special. Only 1 child per 12 adults allowed. So once again, it's like, that's not a very childy joke. Hooters? It's not a terrible joke. Okay? And like, I could see it, if they made an Owls movie about owls and they had a bar called Hooters, you'd be like, well, yeah, I kind of see it. It's easy. But I could see it. But this movie, I was like, I don't know, man. Also, I actually do like the, 12 adults must accompany every child, instead of 12 and under or whatever. But it's kind of wasted. Okay, so then we get to the part where, sure enough, they're eating a bunch of beans and powering the hot air balloon with farts. And there's a line where the Grinch says, we need to all take turns in front of the intake. I think this is going to work. There should be 3 cans of beans left. I think us 3 guys should each eat 1 more. And it's just like, everyone agrees to the plan. Grinch feels some pressure. He moves in front of the intake and yells, fire away. And then I guess this is sound effects. Fart, fart, toot. So sure enough, I don't know why that made me laugh at the time. I think I was delirious with, reading this thing some more. But it was just like, I don't know. I guess farting their way across, that's a fun idea to me. That's a good example of something that I'm like, that's a thing kids would like, right? Farting his way around the world in a hot air balloon. Around the world in 90 million farts. Of course. Yeah. It would be great. Like, a kid ends up in another dimension where it's an entirely fart-based fueling system for everything. So it's just like fart collection everywhere. And then he gets in trouble because he farts just for comedy. And then he's like on trial. And then he's like advocating for like, sometimes farts aren't just about utility. Sometimes it's about having fun. And you guys have forgotten to have fun. And I think the problem is because you don't let yourself fart for fun anymore. It's all become about fueling your airplanes and your automobiles so you can get to work. And you've forgotten to fart because of the love of the fart. You know, you only do it when it has a purpose, a utility, and not just because it's the right thing to do. That's a kid's movie. Okay. The narrator says, everyone keeps hoping the next time they look at see Mount Crumpet. Everyone keeps hoping that the next time they look, they will see Mount Crumpet. The wind is down, thankfully, down to what you would call a mild breeze. It would sure be nice to get that rare southern wind, but oh well, you can't have everything. Grinch looks into the camera with his agitated, grumpy voice. Who does that narrator think he is anyway? Doesn't he understand we're under a lot of pressure here and everyone's trying to do their part in saving us from total disaster? Narrator. I'm sorry, but don't blame me. Uncle Bob told me to say it. He wrote the script. Grinch looks into the camera again. Uncle Bob, what's wrong with you? We're all about to crack here. We're running out of fuel. We're hungry. And before you know it, it's going to start getting dark. Can't you just get us to the part where we see Mount Crumpet? Uncle Bob. I'll talk to the editor and see what we can do. Grinch in a grumpy voice. You're the editor, you idiot. Uncle Bob. Oh yeah, I guess you're right. I don't even know what to call that. That's like beyond the fourth. That's like the fifth wall. Because like the Grinch talking to the narrator or into the camera is the fourth wall. But then like behind the fourth wall is Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob's being named in this. Why is Uncle Bob signing the script as Uncle Bob and also calling him, the characters are calling him Uncle Bob? That makes no sense. That's one of the things that makes me think this might be fake. It's just like, why would he be called Uncle Bob all the time instead of something else? But at the same time, okay, we'll get to this later. Yeah, here's a part where Martha is just out of nowhere. Is just like, Ethan, honey, do you know where my blue necklace is? And then it says, Grinch, really? That's what you're going to worry about at this moment? And I'm like, and then 2 lines later, it says Grinch, mimicking Martha while pacing. I love my blue one, my red one. I cherish them. And, you know, I'm like, this is too confusing. Too confusing. Grinch says to his brother at one point, they find out they're going to land and everyone's happy. And Grinch says to Hans, his brother, stop kissing up to mom and dad and start unpacking the 4 straps under the bench where the beans were. And I just enjoyed it because I was reading it as stop kissing mom and dad, not kissing up to mom and dad, which I just thought that was so fucking funny. Like, okay, here's another thing. You can have, you know, the parents have a very different relationship with the 2 sons. You know what I mean? And it's like Hans is very affectionate, or the parents are very affectionate towards Hans, but not Grinch. Or they want to be that way towards Grinch because they're like, well, that's what Hans likes. And you're a kid. Isn't it the same? And he's like, no, it's not the same. Anyway, they all get home and a bunch of people just show up and to hear them talk. And the crowd silences, and Martha says, hello, Whoville. Grinch and I are so glad to be home. We missed you all. The crowd cheers. We have some very important news to tell everyone. For some of you, it's more important than you would ever imagine. A sign of a bad movie, or like a bad narrative, is you just have like a random crowd. This feels like something The Simpsons has probably made fun of at some point, which is like just a random mob, not a mob, but like a peaceful mob, assembling to hear someone talk about something that may or may not concern them or be related to them in any way. Just like people just have gathered for no apparent reason, right? It's just like they're just there. I can't explain it. I don't know why. They just are. They just are there. You know what I mean? Don't ask questions. Just know that they're there. And that's good enough. But it's like everybody just gathers around to hear something. I mean, maybe if I saw someone just yelling in a town square who had just landed in a balloon, I may take out an earbud and listen. But if they were like, we found Grinch's real parents, I'd be like, weird that someone's named Grinch. Maybe I'd keep listening. And then they're like, and his real name is Ethan. And like, whatever. I would probably give this a minute, to be honest. Because I'd be like, you know, a hot air balloon landing and then a green furry man getting out is unusual. So maybe I'll stay for a minute. But I think at some point I would either be like, I'm afraid someone's going to pull a gun out of that balloon basket just because I don't know what's happening here. But it feels like a situation in which, there'll be YouTube footage of it later and an explosion happens and they'll be like, why were all these idiots just standing around? Or I'd just be bored. Now, this is the part where the Grinch says, I can't wait to see my buddy Max. And I realized we didn't bring Max along on the trip, which is crazy, right? Why would we not bring Max on the trip? That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. You know what I'm saying? Like, Max is like the comic relief. He's the original little sidekick, the cute sidekick who offsets some of the Grinch's unpleasantness. Like the original Grinch Who Stole Christmas works partially because of Max, because you're like, it's a little bit like, Hitler and his dog, where you're like, I bet Hitler's dachshund loved him, right? I bet Hitler's dog thought Hitler was the best. And so when you see the Grinch and you see Max, who's this cute little dog, and Max seems to really love the Grinch, even though the Grinch is, if we're being funny about it, he's bored. I don't know why that's funny. If we're being funny about it, he's abusive to Max. But, if we're just being real about it, it's like, he's kind of a dick to Max, but he's a dick to everyone, right? But like, it gives you faith that you're like, okay, well, I'm watching this Grinch and I don't really care for him, but he must have some kind of quality that's, okay, because this dog loves him. And they've designed this dog character in such a way that I love this dog. So this must work out somehow. And I feel like that's like what Max is there for. So maybe we don't need him in that way that we did before. But I'm like, the opportunities for comic relief there are excellent. You know what I mean? Okay, narrator. Well, I guess they're eating pizza. The pizzas arrive. And then the narrator says, that pizza smells good. Can I have a slice? Grinch, while pointing upward. No, you're not even here. You're up there somewhere. Just get on with your job. Uncle Bob has done a thing. Here's another little writing lesson. When you write a first draft of something, you do come up with ideas as you go. And then some of those ideas are good and some are not good. And like maybe this whole thing of the Grinch interacting with the narrator and even Uncle Bob is pretty good. You know what I mean? I'm like, it does add a dimension to the story, and it gives the Grinch the opportunity to sort of be combative with somebody who we don't like necessarily, because they're just a disembodied voice telling us what's going on. So we don't get mad when the Grinch is being a jerk to the narrator as opposed to like his wife, where we're like, I don't love that. That's, it's not as fun. But here's the thing, guys. When you write a book and then you have an idea like that, what you have to do is eventually you have to go back and be like, okay, I came up with this idea, but I came up with it on like page 50 of 93. So I need to go back in the second draft and start incorporating it a little earlier so that it's a sort of a constant throughout the book or the script. This is something that, my writing teacher would refer to as horses. The horses pull the narrative along, and you kind of have to get your horses in early, and then you keep the same horses. And he's like, if you're pulling a wagon across the country, you have the same horses the entire way, right? You don't change horses. You don't do anything drastic with the horses. You keep the same ones, and they do the same. They function the same way the entire time you're crossing the country. So interacting with the narrator can be a horse in this story, but then you got to go back and put it in early. This is all a way to say, like, the secret of good writing is good editing. Because if you edit something well, it makes it seem like you had a good idea all along instead of having an idea that you came up with, at the end. So then basically they're home and, everything's fine. and the Grinch and Martha find out they're going to have a baby. And there's a terrible illustration with what looks like two dogs. It says, "The End" by Uncle Bob, 11/25/2023, and a badly pixelated JPEG of white snow on a black background. Finito. So that's The Grinch 2 by Uncle Bob. And we got through it, so now we don't have to do it anymore. I'm quite happy about that. Thank you all for listening to yet another episode of Helpful Snowman Radio. I never talk about this on here, but here's two things. You can go to Patreon. It's at helpfulsnowman.com. You'll see there's a way to do that. I write newsletters. I write 2 a week. There's a comedy one, and there's a library, more serious one. So feel free to sign up for those. Those are free, but you can donate if you'd like. And there's a link to my books online. You can buy some books and support me that way, or most of them are available somewhere for free. Internet Archive is a pretty good bet for a lot of them, or, various things. Some of them you could check out on the Hoopla app at one point. I don't know if that's still true. But, do that. Especially the Hoopla one. If your library has Hoopla, get on there and let me just see. I think an audiobook I did is still on there. Yeah, there's an audiobook of The Heistest Heist Ever Heisted. If you use your library checkout to check that out, it benefits me in a very tiny way. So, do that. Do that if nothing else. Use your library. It benefits your library. It benefits me. And, it, I don't know, sticks it to the man. Because it's like, not a major publisher. It's an extremely minor publisher. So anyway, that's what you could do to support if you'd like. Why did I add that? Why did I say if you'd like? Just fucking do it. Don't think about whether you'd like it. Just do it.
Somebody should talk about tool time. Talk about bum wine, yeah. You're asking the questions that nobody could.